It's funny, every time I get a haircut, people think that I'm bald, but that's just because of the angle that I use when I'm doing these streams. So you only see me from a front facing position. So you may not see the hairline nor the hair follicles because I cut it close to the grain. But I assure you, there's hair. If I were bald, I would just say I was bald, but I'm not, unlike my father. But whatever. Anyway, um, so I decided to switch topics. Sunday was a great chat. I don't know if it was because of the time of the day or the content of the topic. I'm thinking both. Um, but if I had to choose, I would think more it was the content of the topic because the last time I addressed a similar topic, I had a bunch of people come into that. So I'm going to do that again probably tomorrow. It won't be the same topic, it'll be something else that is um, steeped in politics. In any case, we're going to change tracks here. We're going to talk about something nerdy. My raison d'etre. So, um, the topic is everything that you think about the mind and behavior is wrong. Yes, I said that. So, people are welcome to prove me wrong. and when I say prove me wrong, I'm being facetious. You don't prove someone wrong. That's not how it works. That's just the common. That's just a common phrase. When I say prove me wrong, I don't really mean prove me wrong. What I'm saying is, show me that you actually do know stuff. I'll be impressed, and I'll acknowledge if if you say something that you're on your A game. Kudos to you. However, if I do stump you on that, I also want you to acknowledge it. uh, and you can even leave me a super sticker if you're thoroughly impressed. Um, and yes, this may cross into other topics, com- not completely related to it, because there are tangential topics related to mind and behavior. What's up, Lyman? Um, but yeah, like I said, I'm gonna I'm gonna double down on that. That everything people think about mind and behavior is wrong because most people most people's affiliation with psychology and cognitive science or neuroscience is through what they see on social media and a lot of these pop science books that they see in the bookstores. Well, probably not bookstores since most people don't go to bookstores anymore. But I guess if you go to Barnes and Noble still, or you see things on Amazon, or you check out videos on YouTube, that might be people's first draw into this world of the behavioral and cognitive sciences. Um, and most of that stuff is um, wishy-washy. Don says, "Tell me some facts, then, bro. Give me a specific thing, and I will." Give me 1 second, guys. Responding to Mrs. Contrarian. Yeah, sorry. Responding to Mrs. Contrarian. Um, some knowledge. I know you said some knowledge, but there's literally. Do you know how wide? Do you know how wide of a field behavioral sciences? I mean, give me something that you were thinking about specifically, and we can talk about that. But it's such a wide breadth of topics within that field, I wouldn't know where to begin. Impulsive behavior. Um, well, here's one thing. I don't know if you have children or not, Don, but um, if you do or you're planning to soon, um, don't allow them to have digital devices before the age of 6. It will ruin their attention span and their ability to focus. And it's not just coming from me. This is from this is from decades of research, and this is something backed by the American Medical Association, the American Pediatric Association, the American Psychological Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the Association for Psychological Science, etc. We know that children at that age are still developing um, neurologically, and so they're going through something called neural pruning, which is their brain is still wiring at that age before school age years. And when you put them in front of these devices, whether it's like a phone, a tablet, laptop, video games, TV, for an inordinate amount of time, it messes with that wiring, which causes attentional deficits um, in their behavior. So you're literally hurting their learning, their ability to learn. So don't do that. You said, "Wish I knew 7 years ago." I mean, it happens, but I'm saying more for like your own kids. We can't do anything about ourselves. I watched TV at a young age, but TV wasn't as TV wasn't as corrosive as it is with people being on like phones and tablets and stuff like that, because the things like social media and stuff like that have algorithms that feed short attention spans. Like they're built on that constant dopamine feed, and it ruins people's attentional spans. Even older people who are online too much tend to not have the the capability to just sit down and read a book. So that's an issue. But yeah, we can't do anything about ourselves, but we can help out the children. So that's a fact for you, as far as impulsive behavior. Here's another one. So a lot of things get mislabeled as addictions. Not everything this an impulsive behavior is an addiction, but we like to call everything an addiction now, like food addiction, porn addiction, sex addiction, all these sort of things. No, these aren't addictions. They're impulsive behaviors, but they're not addictions in the clinical sense. Like an addiction is actually a it's actually a mental disorder, whereas some of these are just impulsive behaviors that can be retrained. So there you go. And I hope you give me a like and subscribe for that. John Proctor says, "How long have you been black?" Ask your mother how long I've been black and her. Anyway, his mother likes to appear regularly on black.com. Anyway, what do I do? So, I work in the financial service sector. I do lead generation and direct marketing, and part time I'm a self defense coach. and I do this. So, but my background is in cognitive science. Um, Specifically, I was a triple major undergrad in college. My triple majors were psychology, linguistics, and philosophy. In psychology, my concentration was um, the biology of psychology, and in philosophy, well, I was all over the place with philosophy, but I steered towards like philosophy of mind, cognitive science, and linguistics. I didn't really have a focus. It's such a small major. I don't think you could really have a. I might be wrong, but I don't remember there being any concentrations within linguistics because it was such a small major. But they had a really good department in my alma mater, like some like noteworthy people within the field. And then I did some grad work in psychology, um, but I haven't completed it yet. So I just consider myself a science nerd. I'm not a doc. I don't have a doctorate in anything. So yeah. What's up, Deborah? How are you? Flutterby says you can do a lot with cognitive. You mean cognitive science or cognitive ability? Either way, yeah. Mm-mm. D Mark says hello. What's up? But yeah, guys, let's like I said, let's have the conversation. Like I said, the whole topic is a challenge. I was like everything you know about the mind and behavior is wrong. So I like to see if people are up to that challenge, and if not, so be it. But I would like to be I would like to be shown to be wrong on that matter. Diane says so. Cognitive science is the way the brain reacts to behavior, or more physics with the brain. No, so cognitive science is a sort of like an interdisciplinary research field that intersects a lot of different um, academic fields, um, cognitive psychology, um, neuroscience, linguistics, anthropology, um, zoology, philosophy of mind, uh, artificial intelligence research, and um, and ethology. So it it was a research field that was um, came out of probably the '60s with probably with the two like the two godfathers of cognitive science, Noam Chomsky and Jerry 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 Fodor, who recently passed away several years ago. They were sort of like the gods of cognitive science. Noam Chomsky kind of brought about the field when he did a takedown of this famous behavioral psychologist named B.F. Skinner, who tried to reduce all like he and a bunch of other um, behaviorists tried to reduce all of psychology to just behavioral conditioning, and thought that you couldn't scientifically study um, the mental attributes whether they're in need or whatever. Like they didn't think they were. It's not that they didn't believe those things didn't exist. Some didn't believe they were that the mental existed, but for the most part, they thought that a psychological, a scientific approach to psychology would have to only study the behavior or dispositions to behavior from either human or animals. And he was proven wrong when he tried to discuss human language in terms of just behavioral conditioning. And Noam Chomsky did a review of B.F. Skinner's book on verbal behavior, taking him down and showing how all of this is mental and can't be denied. That was sort of the start of it in the 60s. And later came on a lot of stuff like Jerry Fodor, a philosopher, philosophy of mind, who pretty much gave us a blueprint of how the mind actually works. He gave us what's now called the classical approach to looking at how the mind works. What's called the I guess the cognitive representational theory of mind. So those two guys started this, and from there, like I said, it grew into this interdisciplinary approach, intersecting like philosophy, psychology, biology, linguistics, and artificial intelligence. So Seth says, I'm a white man. I bless you, my brother. I appreciate it, Seth. Flutterby says, sorry, didn't finish my sentence. No problem, no problem. D Mark says, what are we talking about? So my topic, D Mark, is it's a facetious. The topic is facetious, of course, but the topic is everything you think about everything you know about the mind and behavior is wrong. And basically, I'm saying that because most people's connection to cognitive science and psychology and philosophy of mind all usually stem from like either like pop science or what they've gained or what they've gleaned from social media. At best, some people may have taken a psychology 101 course, but most people haven't even gotten that. Detroit Masses Reparations 2024. Yeah. BTB FPG says, what's happening, Big Pimpin'? What's going on, man? Don says, what was that challenge you was talking about? So it's not a challenge. I was just saying that I would like someone to step up and actually show that they actually know stuff about this field. But but like I said, the challenge is, like I said, the topic, everything you know about the mind and the behavior is wrong. That's my challenge. Show me that I'm wrong on that topic, on that title. Demar says, do you have any way of measuring experiences? Depending on what you mean, yes. What's harder to measure are the content of those experiences. Sometimes we want to question whether the content of those experiences are real. So people might have the experience of seeing ghosts or near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences or the experience of I don't know, floating, floating in space. Like if you say like on a roller coaster or some other sort of thing that puts you in the air for a limited amount of time. So the the experiences are real, but are the content of them real? Some are, some aren't. So yeah, you can measure experiences. It's the content of those experiences that's more questionable whether you can measure those things. So Richard Dvorak says Czech Republic, happy nice day. Thanks, Richard. Um, you have the last name of one of my favorite musical composers. Flutterby says it's simply looking outside the box, right? Mm, not necessarily. So, what cognitive science did, or what the cognitivist approach to psychology in general did, was it made the mental a a a proper thing to be scientifically studied, which rejects the earlier behaviors research program. So this is talked about in philosophy of science when you talk about paradigm shifts. So up until the late 50s, behaviorism was the major paradigm for scientific psychology. Like pretty much if you wanted to get into the field, you were doing something dealing with behavioral conditioning and stuff like that. Um, but like I said, once Noam Chomsky came and dethroned B.F. Skinner, and people like Jerry Fodor came along and actually gave us like a conceptual framework for um, how the mind works a through a computational representational theory of thought, then we had to start taking the mentalist approach seriously. So now most people within psychology are mental realists. So it wouldn't be just looking outside the box, so to speak. Um, Now that the paradigm shifted to the cognitivist approach from the behaviorist approach, now we can look outside the box. That is, looking at the behaviors of people or other animals, stuff like that. But from that, we can now make inferences from those behaviors or those behavioral dispositions to different mental phenomena. So, um, DMAR says, do you believe that it is possible to reprogram your brain to be more positive? Depends on what you mean by reprogram your brain. Um, that sounds like brainwashing. Can you form habits to make you to think more positively? Yes. Um, do I think it's worthwhile? I'm not that sure. Positive is Thinking positively is oversold. Like at the end of the day, I'm a realist, so whether someone's a positivist, I mean, not positive, whether someone chooses to think positively or pessimistically, really doesn't change the way things actually are. Just changes how you think about them. Largely, the world is yeah. By and large, the world is completely independent of what we think, feel, or believe about it. I hate when people send me messages while I'm live streaming. But anyway, um, but yes, if you want to be a more positive thinking person, yes, there are things you can do to increase that. There are certain techniques that people talk about that may be more or less useful, such as like biofeedback and stuff like that. Some of those approaches are more mm, some of those are more scientific than others. Some are not. Like you have think, and I don't want to confuse neurofeedback with biofeedback, but biofeedback is a little sketchier. But neurofeedback, I think, is the one that actually has some sort of um, hard evidence behind it. But it depends on why you want to think positively and what what you choose, what you want to get out of it. So D-Mark says, I just appreciate it, brother. Don says, I'm gonna catch you another time. Thanks, Don. Well, thanks for chiming in, man. jump on the stream again. I usually do these around the same time every evening, depending on where you live. It's evening here in Maryland, Eastern Standard Time. So around the same time, same bat channel. uh, Demar says, so can you measure the reaction to the experience? Again, what you kind of being a little vague, so I can't really answer that. What do you mean the reaction? A person's rea- your rea- a person's reaction to their own experience, or someone else's reaction to another person's experience? I don't. You have to kind of be more specific. Hefe 47 says, "Do you help the poor?" What do you mean by the poor? Are you talking about Are you talking about the homeless? Are you just talking about people of low income? What do you mean by the poor? The poor can mean a lot of different things. And mind you, the poor can be different things in different countries. I've fed the homeless, and again, your question isn't very relevant to my topic. So I'm gonna give you this one time, and next time, if you want to ask me a question outside of the topic, drop it in the super chat. But I'll give you this one. So yes, I've fed homeless. I've made food to give to the homeless. I've bought food. I've bought people food with my own money in other countries, because in other countries, those are the real homeless. Like when you're in a third, well, I don't want to say third world countries. I hate that term, but when you're in a under when you're in an underdeveloped country, those homeless people are the real homeless. Like when they don't get food, they will die. There's no there's no fat homeless people in the Philippines. Okay, like in America, America's the only country you're gonna go to where you find fat homeless people. In places like India and the Philippines and places like that, when you are homeless, you starve. I help those folks. Am I gonna help someone here just because they're low income? No. They had access to education and other resources here in America, because we there's a lot of social welfare here in America that other countries don't enjoy. Moreover, depending on your racial racial ethnic background, you may have been one of the people in this country, and I'm talking about the United States, where the country was designed for you to prosper. So if you can't prosper in a country where the cheat codes were written for you, then I don't feel sorry for you. And I'm not going to say which group that is, but I think everyone can pretty much guess who I'm referring to. If you can't make it in your own country where the cheat codes were designed for you to prosper for over 400 years, don't really feel sorry for you. Anyway, back to the topic. Flutterby says anything positive, just enjoy and keep hold of it. Keeps the negative experiences away. I don't know if you're talking about negative experiences or negative thoughts, because it seemed like you're wavering between negative negative and positive thoughts and negative positive experiences. We're not That's not the same thing. Experiences are actual things people go th- like things people go through, not things in their mind. The things in their mind are the content, the semantic content behind such experiences. So I, I want to make that clear. Like, don't entangle experiences with the mental states attributed to those experiences. That's why I made that distinction between the experiences themselves and the content of those experiences. Experiences by themselves, may not be positive nor negative. It may be how you think, feel, or believe about them that are positive or negative. So yeah, you're not my father, Frody, so you can go. I don't know why you think putting that in French would confuse me. I know French. Anyway, so DMark says, I don't know how to translate into English. I read somewhere that you could strengthen neurotransmitters networks into more positive ways of thinking in people with depressions, etc. Strengthen? I don't I don't know what you're talking about. So when you're talking about dealing with mental disorders like depression and stuff like that, that may take therapy, that might take psychotherapy or psychoactive medication. Sometimes it may even take mild electrical stimulation, as well as some behavioral or social training. But that's neurotransmitters network. No, neurotransmitters are just neurochemicals used by your brain for the purposes of signaling and exchanging, and for the purposes of signaling between the different um, neural cells, like your gray matter or whatever, um, for the purposes of information and things like that. These neurotransmitters carry information, so through the firing of action potentials, or um, I don't want to get too much into the jargon, but basically your brain cells are connected with each other through these fibers on which neurotransmitters are released between them that propel electrical electrical chemical signals for the purposes of communication amongst these brain cells, and they carry information. So Flatterby says, so the campus, I'm sure I spelt that correctly, is not the main point in the brain that controls thought patterns. Campus? Oh, I think you mean cortex. No, you don't don't conf- you're confusing. Don't confuse terms for. Don't confuse biological terms with psychological terms. Like the mind, the mind supervenes on the brain. That's why we sometimes just call it the mind brain, because the mind is basically what the brain does. In other words, but we have different ways of talking about different levels of psychology. So we're just talking about the physical implementational level. That's the stuff when we're talking about brain biology, neurology, and stuff like that. Those terms. When we're talking about um, more of the functional things, um, like how the mind works. That's those we talk about that in other terms. And then when we're talking about more of the algorithmic and law-like type um, phenomena, that's explained in another set of terms. So there's at least three levels of explanation when it comes to science. Like you have your mathematical algorithmic level, you have your functional level, and then you have your implementational level. What the brain does is is correlated with some of these hypothetical mental constructs, but it's not the same thing. So it it gets confusing if you talk about these things in the wrong way. You're going to confuse yourself and you're going to confuse others. When talking about thoughts and other sorts of mentalistic things, we're talking about things at the functional mental level, not at the implementational biological level. Guarantee says, "What's up, Doc? What's the topic tonight?" The topic is everything you think about the mind and behavior is wrong. Flubby says it's almost 1 a.m. for me, so I'm going to have to set my alarm for you. All right, well, if you got to go, you got to go. No problem here. DMar says it's hard for me to translate it. I'll try to be more specific. Yeah, because this, if you talk about things in a confused way, you're not going to get a good response. The best answer is produced by the best question. And I'm guessing from your YouTube handle, DMark, that you're perhaps in Germany. D standing for Deutschmark, maybe. Guarantee says philosophic theory. Not philosophic theory, just with actually more cognitive science. But what I'm challenging people is that they can talk about things dealing with psychology or cognitive science in a meaningful way and not just based on the stuff they see on social media or they glean from pop science books, which are often written by clinical psychologists who have done very little research in the field. Patrick Dorian says poor or needy. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, Patrick. Like I said, he was saying poor, and that's a vague term because what do we mean by poor, right? I was like, is he by saying poor someone who's actually of someone who's just of low income that doesn't deserve by that someone who's of low income in itself doesn't mean they deserve handouts from people. Does he mean someone who's like indigent and on the streets? Then yeah, are we what that so it depends on what he means by poor. So I don't just hand money out to people. I'm not rich, and even if I were rich, I wouldn't just hand out money to people then either. Even if I were of Elon Musk type money, that's I don't do that. Plus, like I said, if we're talking about people here in America, I'm going to have less sympathy because people here have more access to social welfare programs they can utilize that aren't available in other countries that I've visited or lived in. Like I said, America is the only place I know where you can have fat homeless people. When you're homeless in any other like underdeveloped country, you're starving. So, uh, Demar says I'm from Denmark, so the structure of the language is a bit different. Okay, gotcha. Hylomorphic theory. I don't even know what hylomorphic theory is, but it has nothing to do with what I'm saying. Like I said, I'm the question the topic is straightforward. I'm saying everything you know about the mind and behavior is wrong. What I'm saying is most people's knowledge of psychological science is inadequate. That's what I'm saying. The reason why I'm bringing up the topic is because psychology or cognitive science more generally is the only field left, it's the only scientific field left where people can still think they hold an informed opinion on something that they have absolutely no background in that field whatsoever. Whereas all the other more mature sciences, people know to leave it to the experts, to the adults in the room. People know they can't just mouth off about biology and people take them credibly. They know they can't just talk about physics and people take them credibly. They know they can't just mouth off about astronomy and people take them credibly. They know they can't just talk about chemistry or um, or the earth sciences and people take them credibly. But for some reason, psychology, which is also a natural science, believe it or not, is the last like scientific field, at least natural science field, where people can still mouth off about it and have strong informed opinions on it even though they have no background in it. So that's why I'm saying in this topic that everything you know about mind and behavior is wrong, because most of these people have no background in it. Demar says bonjour. Flutterby says poor underdeveloped mentality. I've helped dyslexics learn to read and write. Is that class that's helping the poor? No. Were they, when he's saying poor, he's talking about economically poor. I believe he's referring in some sense to their financial state of affairs, not them having learning disabilities. That is something completely different. He basically was going on a tangent that had nothing to do with the topic. That's why I said I'll grant him that one question, but afterwards, if he wants to ask me anything else, it needs to be in the form of a super chat, because it doesn't have any relevance to the given topic today. And I need to get some water because my throat's starting to hurt. By the way, guys, hope you're digging the samurai meditation music. Hold up here. Alrighty. I'm gonna detach this from my charger so I can get a little more comfortable. Alright, see what I missed. D-Mark says, what I meant was if someone is going through an experience, I know it's possible to measure emotions and hormones, but is it possible to measure to an extent where you can guess what they experience? Again, I think you're confusing experience with the mental or semantic content of that experience. The experience is like the experience of, I don't know, flying on an airplane for the first time by yourself. That's an experience. Yes, that's possible. That's easy to measure. I think what you're getting at is the feeling of that experience, and again, that's the content of that experience, not the experience itself. That's why I keep saying you're getting it wrong. You're entangling the content of the experience with the experience itself. Yes, experiences are external; those can be easily measured and quantified. The experience is, again, external. What you're asking for is the internal, which is the content. That's what I think. That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying you're making a categorical error there. Like I said, thank you for explaining again. It's hard for me to form the question in English, but your answer was really good. No problem. I hope that makes sense. Mercanoid Peanut Butter is back. He says, do you think the homeless in the U.S. are fatter than those countries because of the food or the culture in the U.S. where they will get it by any means necessary, like stealing or eating out of trash? So it's no one thing, Mercanoid Peanut Butter. And again, I don't want to get this derailed into a topic about poverty in America and stuff like that, because that could be a complete topic for another day. But again, yes, American, the food, that people of lower income have more access to is more unhealthy, because often these people live in places where their food, where the most easily accessible food comes from convenience stores, and um, takeout food, um, delis, stuff like that. These aren't places for healthy food, as opposed to going to supermarkets or um, sit-in restaurants, places like that. But these little convenience stores and takeout um, takeout restaurants, these little sub shops and delis, these don't give healthy food, and these poor people end up spending more on these on like, well, first the unhealthy food is cheaper, which is a byproduct of our fucked up government regulations. But also, if they don't buy food that they can store and cook at home, they're going to pay more out of pocket buying like um, takeout food and stuff like that. But also, like, say for homeless and stuff like that, a lot of them are fat because, like I said, they have their only access to foods are unhealthy foods. Also, they're um, a lot of them may be homeless, but a lot of them may still easily acquire food because they may be homeless for different reasons. They could be homeless because they have mental disorders that are untreated, um, and that's like at least 50% of the homeless right there are people who suffer from untreated um, mental health problems. Then you have others who are homeless, who are functionally homeless, where they're without a home, but they might live in their car or stay on the couch of a buddy or something like that, back and forth because of problems with securing a quality job. I've I've been there. I understand that. Um, or there are some who have criminal backgrounds that prevent them from returning to a mainstream society and holding a job. And I'm not gonna feel, I'm of mixed emotions with that one because on one hand, you committed the crimes, so you're paying the price. On the other hand, we should allow people who've made those mistakes and moved on to be able to acclimate back into mainstream society because everyone needs to earn a place, earn 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 money to eat. Otherwise, it leads to recidivism where they continue committing crimes. So you have these three types of people on the streets. And again, like I said, not all homeless are also people who are food deprived. However, in other countries, like I said, underdeveloped countries, most of the homeless, regardless of why they're on the streets, are usually facing starvation. So, DeMark says it's 2:03 a.m. here. Man, if you gotta go ahead. Like we can pick this up later, and you can watch this on the replay too. Like every time I do a live stream, afterwards I upload it, and you can watch it in its entirety on replay. So if about like you don't have to stay up that late just to enjoy this stream. I mean, I appreciate it a lot. Trust me, I appreciate it. But again, I don't want you to go out, go out of sync with your pattern, whatever it is, for getting up and doing your thing. So if you gotta go, that's cool. Like I said, just watch the rest of this on replay when you get a chance, because it'll be uploaded here. Ahmad Ali says, Mr. First Generation, great black gavis and suits, soldiers in God's army. I don't get that. But we have similar names, by the way. My name is Aman. You're Ahmad, but Aman. So, Flutterby says, you're explaining so much to me. Thank you. I'm so interested in separating the differences. I really need it. So Here's my recommendation for a good book for you. There's a book called How the Mind Works by Steven Pinker. He's a very famous cognitive scientist out of Harvard University, and he's also within this the academic circles of a lot of the public intellectuals that I admire. People like Richard Dawkins and Neil deGrasse Tyson and um, uh, my own professor George Ray, and some people who've passed away, of course, like Jerry Fodor, but also people who are still alive, like Noam Chomsky. So read, check out the book How the Mind Works by Steven Pinker, and that's Steven with a V, not a PH. Steven Pinker, and that goes for everyone else too. You guys can check out that book. Is written for the layman, so you don't have to have any previous background in psychology. You don't have to have any previous background in neuroscience. You don't have to have any previous background in philosophy. The stuff that gets jargonistic, he will explain. So it's written. It's a pop sci book that is very good at explaining a lot of introductory um, subject matter with what I'm talking about right now. So, uh, Demar says Flerby, I think it's a bit wrong to call dyslexic people underdeveloped. Their brain is just different. Often they are amazingly creative. And my father's dyslexic, and he is or was an accomplished person. He's a lawyer, a CPA. He had a master's in finance. He was an adjunct professor at a few universities like Morgan and Howard and some other places. So a learning disability by itself does not mean someone is unintelligent or less intelligent. It just means they have a specific uh, problem learning something like this. So for dyslexic, that means they have issues with their reading abilities. Lex refers, to um, like word or meaning, things like that. Just like there's people with dyscalculia. I had a friend, she had dyscalculia. She graduated from college just fine. She just knew that she had to avoid courses where it had math in it because she couldn't handle it. And unfortunately, like our college, like most American college systems, expect you to be well rounded. So you still have to do like a college level math course, and if you can't do that college level math course, you have to take prerequisites to get to that college level math course, and you have to pass it to to fulfill your requirements for graduation. Maybe she got a workaround for that, or she found a um, college level math that she could handle, but it was hard for her. But otherwise, she could handle other topics. Learning disabilities don't mean your brain is underdeveloped, so that's a bad way to look at things. Um, Flutterby says I'm actually trying to define to help my CRPS, which is basically brain is confusing messages from my foot, and I've been told it will cause PTSD, which is more thought pattern related. I'm just a mess. Yeah, I'm confused with that statement itself. Flutterby says that Mark, sorry, I truly didn't mean it to come across that way. Run out of typing space. Should have had an or between the words. I truly didn't mean to offend anyone. Um, that's fine. I get it. DeMar says, but if you measure the brain and only have the content of the experience, is it possible to guess from that what the person is experiencing? So if you only have data on someone's brain, no, that's not. When I say content, DeMark, I'm talking about semantic content, which is another way of talking about meaning that you don't measure. Like I said, I don't know how you measure semantic content. We're talking about meaning. What meanings some experience like what meanings some experience holds for someone, or the content in our, or even our, like our mental states, our intentional mental states. Well, all mental states are intentional. That's one of the things we discovered through cognitive science, right? Is that all mental states are intentional. But with mental states, or what's sometimes called um, um, well, I don't want to get into all that stuff, but with our mental states, right, or thoughts, there's content. They have underlying content as well. What we normally think of the content of these mental states are are propositions, or the propositional content. Those are the contents of our mental states and of our sentences. Like usually, what's considered the content of sentences and thoughts or other mental states like thoughts are propositions. When it comes to experiences, they're often considered um, qualitative content, but there's disagreement within the cognitive science whether that content actually exists or not. For a lot of us, these qualitative experiences, like what is the experience of riding a plane for the first time, what's the experience of winning a marathon, um, like the the content, the qualitative content of those experiences, a lot of us might deny that the content exists. We might say the experiences are real, but the content of those experiences aren't. Same thing with like talking about the experiences of someone saying they've seen a ghost, or they've been touched by they've been uh, touched by aliens. And you know which way I'm talking about touching. Like, you know how some crazy people say, I was molested by aliens, stuff like that, or I've had out of body experiences or near death experiences. Those things, those the qualitative content of those experiences, we might deny those things. We would say there's just semantic content. There's no qualitative content there. Okay. Um, and we would just say that the semantic content of qualitative experiences are just just a different type of propositional content. I don't want to get you too confused with all these different terms, but basically, again, so when it comes to sentences or mental states like thoughts or beliefs, there's semantic content, which are propositions. And when it comes to experiences, particularly qualitative experiences, like what is the feeling of winning a marathon, or what's the feeling of riding an airplane for the first time. These obviously these experiences happen, right? But it's the content of those experiences. Are they real? These qualitative content? I don't know. It's not something we can measure. And for a lot of hard nosed philosophers and hard nosed cognitive scientists, if something is unmeasurable, that kind of hints to it being immeasurable. And if it's immeasurable, it just doesn't exist. So, um, some qualitative experiences, the content may be real, but can't say that for all everything. Also, some qualitative experiences, yes, they can actually be elicited through physical means. So we know now that people who suffer like near death experiences or out of body experiences, we can replicate that experience through actually like stimulating different parts of the brain electrically, because we now know that such things like a near death experience or out of body experiences is usually the the effects of a brain that's dying or has experienced like injury or physical trauma, and a brain that suffers from physical trauma or injury may elicit certain firings in parts of the brain and parts of the cerebral cortex, which will be interpreted by the person undergoing that trauma as certain experiences like near death experiences or out of body experiences, stuff like that. I hope that makes sense. Linda Chavez says your ears are fucked up. Yeah, well, so's what's between your legs, but we work with what we got to work with, don't we, Linda? Like, I don't come down, I don't come knocking down your door asking why your twat stinks, because you got to make a living with it, right? So don't bother me at my job. Anyway, D-Mark says, is it then possible to see if they are flying a plane, for instance? Um, I don't know what you mean by see if they are flying a plane. Again, there are certain behaviors or acts that people will do that will that will light up parts of different parts of the cortex. So when you're doing something that takes thinking, decision making, and judgment, that's going to light up parts of the prefrontal cortex, because that would be the neural correlate for for the mental systems involved in planning and decision making and thinking and making judgments, those sorts of things. All of those higher um, higher end cognitive activities will be um, correlated with a lot of activity in that part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. There's but no, there's no way to see, quote unquote, that they're flying a plane by simply taking um, neural images of their brain. D Mark says, "Father, be no problem. You seem like a good person. Don't worry." Linda says, "You look like you drive a Fiat." No. Try again, Linda. Linda, listen. Listen, Linda. Linda, 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 listen. Listen, Linda. Listen, Linda. Linda, you listening? You listen, Linda? Linda, you listening? You going on timeout. CDP says Linda Chavez drives a Jetta. Get the F out of here. I don't speak Russian, my friend. If that's Russian, or I don't know, something in Cyrillic. So if you're speaking something in Russian or Ukrainian or Lithuanian or something, I can't understand it. You're gonna have to use a translator app to put that in English. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be rude. I can't translate that. Um, Mercanoid Peanut Butter says, I'm guessing not from the US, Linda, because Fiats in the US haven't been cheap since Obama was in office. A 2024 Fiat is like 40K a year. I don't know, like she's acting like a Fiat was like a diss. Like, I don't the truth of the matter is I don't have a car in the US because I travel too often to want to waste money that way. I rather, besides that, I'm planning on moving overseas, so there's no point in me buying a vehicle here and then I'll either have to end up selling it or giving it away or whatever. That's just a waste of money because it would cost too much money to ship it overseas. The amount of money it would take to ship a vehicle overseas would be the same price of just buying a vehicle there itself. So, not to mention, there are more stringent regulations on inspections for vehicles overseas. No. I'm sorry. The there will be a difference in the what's this, what will pass inspection in other countries than here. So that's not worth it. But yeah, Fiat is not a Fiat is not a off-brand vehicle here. So I don't know what she's talking about. She need to stick to wherever the fuck she's doing. CDP says you're just upset. I know who you are, no matter what name you use. Are you referring to me? I'm not sure what you're talking to. So I don't think I said anything rude to you. You talking about Linda? I'm sorry, man. Um, I don't know why she's trying to clown. She said, "Dude, your teeth are like a broken fence." Okay, but they're white and they're healthy, and I've never had a cavity, and I'm 46. Never had a cavity. Never had a broken tooth, and my teeth are white. But you're a troll on my channel. Mind you, I've never even had a broken tooth, and I do kickboxing, so whatever. Like she just came in here starting ruckus. So let's get back to our scheduled topic, guys, because bitches want to cause chaos. This is why some people don't need to vote. But anyway, back to this, back to our scheduled topic. And CDP? What's wrong with cutting? Yeah, what's up with her talking about? That's why you cut the crust off your bread. So what? If you do that, okay, right? Like, what makes that bad? Like, she's on something today, but she had to go bye bye. Maybe she can spend that time doing a dish. Sneebleman says Neil deGrasse Tyson sold me a fake TiVo. Yeah, okay, I'm sure he did, bro. Draketh Namikaze says Linda, nobody loves you for trolling. Deb Lewis says I'll be down backwards. D says, thank you. I have learned a lot from you. You may have a great day, evening. You do the same, man. I know it's late for you. Um, I'm probably gonna be adding more moderators as we now that I've kicked into a different gear, now that I'm monetized and I'm dealing with an influx of trolls. It wasn't as bad previously because one, I wasn't monetized, and two, I had less of an audience. But now with more folks, I have to be more mindful of that. So my wife sometimes moderates, but she can't always do it at the time that I stream. So looking for some moderators, and I already have a few in mind. However, neither one of them are actually online right now. So, I mean, um, on here right now, and the two of them I've spoken with before. So we'll be looking to add some moderation so we can actually have a more productive conversation, guys. And like I said, I already have some folks in mind. So Flutterby says, so experience. Like five people could look at a picture, but they could explain it differently because of experience. Semantic equals different explanations. Sorry, I should probably stop with my silly questions. They're not silly questions. It's just we got to get these things correct. Experience are the things that you actually, again, so Flutterby, I'm saying the experience is the internal. It's the, excuse me, it's the external thing. So our experience right now of us having this exchange of this communication right now, this is an experience. What you think about the experience is internal, right? And those thoughts you're having about the experience have content, that is semantic content or meaning. The meat was what those semantic content or meaning of those thoughts or feelings or beliefs you have about this experience, those are called propositions. And to be more specific, propositional content. But we can just say, so that I don't confuse you, just say these are propositions or the meanings of our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, or even the sentences that we that we uh, that we utter. So again, it's just like experiences are the external thing, sentences are the external thing, right? So when we utter a sentence, that's external. Um, but the content of those sentences or the meaning of those um, sentences are propositions. The content of these experiences depend. So we might be talking about qualitative experiences. When I say qualitative experiences, I mean the feeling of doing something or seeing something or like even something external, right? But the content of the experience may not be real, because what if you say you're eating a air sandwich? Then the content of the experience of the air sandwich isn't going to be real, but there will still be propositional content that is some sort of um, like there'll be some sort of semantic content related to that, maybe some sort of, and again, sorry, I'm gonna have to be a little technical here, some sort of indexical first person propositional content. When I say first person, meaning it's about yourself. When I say indexical, or um, I'm again, it's self-referential, like you're referring to yourself in this experience. You're the I in this experience. Like I don't mean I mean I as in capital I. Like in these sort of qualitative experiences, usually the propositional content is about the person itself. So they're self-referential, indexical type propositional content where it's all about yourself and referring to yourself in this experience. But maybe the maybe the qualitative content, which is sometimes called qualia, as opposed to the semantic content, which is referred to as propositions or meanings, they may not be there. The qualia may not actually exist. The qualitative content, the qualia. So you might experience seeing a ghost. So there is the genuine experience of fear, the genuine experience of walking down a creepy hallway at night where you can't see anything, but you see a burst of light or something else creepy, or you hear sounds. So you say you experience seeing a ghost, but there may not have actually been a ghost. So the content of the experience isn't real, but the experience itself was very much so real. Like you really had that fear. You really walked through a creepy hallway and heard sounds and saw some burst of light. But what you didn't know was maybe those sounds was just coming from an open window, or it was just the sound of the house itself settling, because old homes, you can hear them settling from the foundation on which it was built. And the burst of light may have been an animal, or the lights coming from a car coming through the window, whatever, something. It doesn't matter. The point is, the ghosts maybe have not existed, but the experience of thinking you saw a ghost is very much real. I hope that I hope that helps. Again, semantic refers to meaning. Qualitative refers to like the, the feeling of something. So the CDP says is a DMT burst from the pineal gland during end of life or near death experience. DMT. I'm not sure which neurotransmitter you're referring to. DMT. I'm sorry. I'm out of I'm out of sorts when it comes to all the different chemical names of neurotransmitters. I don't know if you're referring to dopamine, or if you're talking, or you meant 5-HT, which is the precursor to serotonin, or something else. I'm not sure. But in any case, when I was referring to near death experiences or out of body experiences, stuff like that, I was just saying that those are the effects of either a dying brain or a brain that's gone through trauma or injury, and that can actually be replicated by electrically stimulating those parts of the brain where those experiences can be elicited during trauma. That was my point. Nope, Sabino, I'm not here to cheer you up. Sorry, not my role. Go somewhere else. Go seek professional help. Demar says, exactly. I have my answer. Thank you. Incredible, valuable information for me to learn. Appreciate it. Flurry says, I have to say, you're not only intelligent and a genuine gentleman, but handsome too. Thank you for your patience with me on your stream today. Thank you. I appreciate it. CDP says, yeah, Linda was just a troll. I see you on most lives using different names, but always unable to spell. Apologies, they tried to derail the chat. It happens a lot, CDP. Like, I was asking other people, and apparently trolls just jump from one live stream to the next, just for the purposes of just anarchy and chaos. But I think these are people who are pretty unhappy in their lives. They have to do stuff like that. I'm pretty sure Linda isn't even a woman. um, Flurry says, "I got it. I have not got the correct lingo, but um, but at least I understand it now." Oh, you're welcome. I appreciate it. Mike Guy says, "Do you oil up on your streams?" No, but your mother does for me. I don't know why they come for Gen X's. Like, do you know I have like a million ways to insult your mother on any given day, and that's when I'm being nice. Flutterby says, "Welcome to Contrarian." Thank you, Flutterby. Thanks for that, man. He signed up as a member. That's my first member, guys. Appreciate it. Flutterby says, "At Mike, don't blame him. He didn't oil up. I stole your cooking oil so you can lose weight." Good one. Caleb says, "Do you believe in Jesus?" You gotta be more specific, Caleb. What do you mean? Do I believe that the biblical Jesus existed, or do you mean the historical Jesus existed, or do you mean do I believe he is the same as God? I'm a pedantic person, so if someone asks me a vague question, I'm gonna ask you to specify it. Okay, and since it's not relevant to the topic, maybe you can leave a super chat or a super sticker since you want to ask me religious questions because I've had previous live streams where I've answered religious questions, but that's a different one. CDP says W to Flutterby. Yes, sir. Big W. Thank you. He says you're worth it. Appreciate it, man. This is one of my favorite topics, by the way. You're talking about like cognitive science or philosophy. These are my two favorite subjects, obviously, since this is what I majored in. So yeah. But do anybody else have any questions? So what I was telling Flutterby and D Mark, so I was explaining like some basic terms from like philosophy of mind, cognitive science. Well, I was talking about aspects of the representational theory of thought with propositions and qualia and all these other sorts of mental phenomena, right? And I was saying when I was talking about experiences, what I think he was confusing was the um, the internal aspects of the experience. I was talking about the external aspects of the experience, and I wanted to separate the external thing, which is the experience itself, from the internal thing, which is our thoughts or feelings or beliefs about the experience. Those were different from it, right? Just like sentences are external things. When we utter a sentence or any sort of verbal utterance, those are external, but the content or the meaning behind those utterances are internal. So there are some people in philosophy and cognitive science who don't want to even deal with the internal stuff or the mental stuff. They're externalists. They're called externalists, and you have moderate externalists like myself. Then you have radical externalists. Radical externalists believe that there's only the external and nothing internal behind it. Um, then you have people who are strong internalists, but again, I'm an internalist myself, but I acknowledge the externalist phenomena because they obviously exist, but I also believe the internal phenomena exists too. So I guess I would be an internalist if I'm not a radical externalist. I don't want to get too jargonistic, guys. But yeah, so like something like a uttering a sentence is external. Something like experiencing falling, you know, falling off a ledge or something like that. That's external. How you felt about falling off that ledge is internal. Like that's your feelings or thoughts behind it, right? The thoughts themselves have content, and that content will be the meaning or propositions. Um, Whereas the feeling of it is harder to square. The feeling would be the qualitative content or the qualia. That may not really exist. What we consider the qualitative content might just be a different, might just be another way of looking at propositional content or propositions, a more self-referential indexical type of proposition where it's referring to yourself and how you and the experiences in that experience are processing it, which is actually very controversial in cognitive science because to throw away the qualia or qualitative content would be a way of saying that that sort of consciousness, qualitative consciousness, doesn't exist. But I don't want to get too far into that unless people are interested. Um, Arcadian Hobgoblin says, Joseph, you are very rarely use your mind. Well, to actually have written that statement, you very much had to use your mind. Flutterby says emotional, internal, factual, external, kind of loose explanation to my mouth. So, okay. So, no, emotions themselves I'm sorry, I'm going to confuse you a little bit more, Flutterby, um, but just hold on 1 second. So the emotions are actually the external expressions of feelings. So again, the emotions are external too. The emotions are your like your physical expressions of your feelings, right? The feelings are what's internal. Just like sentence, like your utterances of a sentence or a statement, those are physical. Like your utterances are physical. What they express are, or what the meaning of those utterances, those are internal. The propositions, those are internal. But the utterances of the sentences themselves, those are external. Those are physical. Just like emotions, your emotional expressions, those are physical. Those are something we can see and measure. But it's the feelings that they express, those are internal. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Excuse me. Arcadian Hobgoblins, but on a real note, I don't know how it ended up turning out. But Sam Harris made reference to being able to determine people's simplistic thoughts, choose color A or B, basically before the subject. Yeah, Sam Harris is a some one of the public intellectuals I hold in deep esteem as well. He's one of the two last so-called horsemen of the new horsemen of the new atheism that came about in the early 2000s. Two of them unfortunately already passed away. First, it was the journalist. I forgot that British guy's name, but he died in the late 2000s. Then uh, Daniel Dennett died 2 months ago. Important important philosopher. And now we have Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins left because it was like the four horsemen of the new atheism, and it was the four of them. So only Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins are left. Um, yeah, you can I guess depending on what you mean determine people's thoughts. Sure. Um, depending on what you're talking what you're referring to. Yeah, he said Arcadian says um, themselves were conscious of the thought leading him to believe that free will was non-existent. Any thoughts? Well, I like a lot of people in psychological science don't believe in free will as well, and I agree with Sam Harris. That was where he and Daniel Dennett, excuse me, that was a big contention between him and Daniel Dennett. Daniel Dennett didn't really believe didn't really believe free will existed, but he thought that we had to maintain the belief in free will, otherwise it would lead to nasty consequences, right? Where Sam Harris said we don't need to maintain this illusion of free will because it just simply doesn't exist, and maintaining that it doesn't really help people. That was the contention between them. Um, but yes, I agree with Sam Harris that free will doesn't exist, and that it for actually Arcadia, I did an entire live stream about this. If you want to check it out, about a few weeks ago, about uh, I called it like I talked about human freedom, but I was talking about free will. The problem with free will is that none of us can even agree to what it is. Like none of us can agree on what what the phenomena actually is, because we all have different concepts of it, right? And then even if we did, it's not. It, we don't know if there's actually like if it even adds anything to an explanation of of our mental of our mental processes and behavior. So that's the two problems. Like those, based on those, based on those two things, it becomes kind of dubious that there's free will. Like one, we have there's no agreement amongst people in the field of what it even is. Then second, it, the, the phenomena or the concept behind the phenomena really doesn't add anything to an explanation of behavior. And three, we believe that human behavior is like all aspects of nature is governed by laws of science. We don't think that for some reason human behavior is exempt from the laws of science, whereas everything else isn't. So that's why I believe Sam Harris was right and Daniel Dennett was wrong on that. But I do acknowledge Daniel Dennett's point that when people that research shows that when people are are made aware that free will is an illusion, that they tend to be less moral in their behavior. So, um, Arcadian says, I'm not sure of the experiment, but something to do with fMR, fMRI scans of the brain. I'm not familiar with the work that the research Sam Harris did or was referring to, so I'm sorry. Um, CDP says, was that on the Theories of Everything podcast? Is that so? Is that the name of Sam Harris podcast? It's called the Theories of Everything? Because I'm not familiar with it, guys. Oh shoot, I forgot the got. Oh man, no one told me that the music went off. Let me get the samurai meditation music back. I don't know if any of you were able to hear it anyway, but I'm gonna bring it back because I completely forgot that it turned off. Sorry about that. Get this music back, guys. Um, Flubby says internal is what people don't see, external is what people can see. Got it. I think kind of, sort of. Internal, internal can be either something that's abstract or mental. External is something that's physical or measurable. And that's a very rough way of looking at it. But if you look at it in those terms, internal is something that's either is referring to either something that's either abstract or mental, whereas external is something that's either physical or measurable. Then you're on good you're on good you're on good ground there. Christopher Hitchens, yeah, that was his name. GDP, thank you. Yeah, Christopher. It was sad when Christopher Hitchens died of cancer. I think it was back in 2006 or 2008 when he passed away. And being one of the four horsemen of the new atheists, he said, the prospect of him having terminal cancer didn't certainly make him religious. So that was pretty funny. Arcadian Hagos is being all nice. I was struggling with the name myself. And guys, be like Flutterbees. He gifted me with uh, a Just A Contrarian membership. So appreciate it. Um, well, and I'm sorry, he gifted a membership to Liam Jones as well. Thank you. Appreciate it, guys. Okay, he says, man, what a deep thought. Would people find purpose or drive or inspiration if everyone is almost predestined to only do what they're going to do? So, no, 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 no. So, all right, let's confuse. So, This is why I said you should check out my previous live stream when I talked about human freedom. When I'm talking about human freedom, I'm talking about free will. Um, if you don't, people who believe in free will are sometimes called libertarians, not in the political sense, but in the philosophical sense. They're called metaphysical libertarians, not political libertarians, meaning they believe in freedom, as in free will. Uh, but everyone who rejects free will aren't aren't fatalists. So you have determinists, which is what I am. I'm a determinist. But you also have people who are compatibilists. Compatibilists are people who think that you can both be a determinist and believe in free will. But you also have fatalists, people who believe that no matter what you do, everything is predestined. That's not the same as determinism. So determinists just believe that, you know, everything is um, that everything is all of nature is governed by laws, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they think that no matter what you do, everything is predestined. That's that's not the case. That those are fatalists who believe that. You be I don't find that a rational position either to say that no matter what you do, everything is going to happen. I mean, that just seems absurd. So, is it the case that if I never work out, I'm still going to be like physically fit and then I can like run marathons? I don't think so. But a hard-minded fatalist will say, well, yeah, if you were predestined to win a marathon and have a six pack, then you're gonna have it regardless of what you do. I don't. Obviously, that's not very real. I don't think that's realistic. So not predestined. People who believe in predestination are fatalists. I think that's an extreme position to take. Flatterby says if free will doesn't exist, does that mean there are no fresh new ideas too? No, 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 no. Those have nothing to do with each other. Fresh ideas, or what we would say are like like what people say are ideas. We can either they're either referring to concepts or other sorts of mental representations. Mental representations um, have enough are not are not dependent on there being some sort of freedom of will. Mental representations are actually very important in the explanation of our cognition. Basically, mental representations are symbols manipulated by the mind for the purposes of knowledge. So, um, that has nothing to do with free will. Free will, like I said, it's very hard to nail down what people think about free will because no one has a no one can agree to a definition of it that can satisfy everyone in the in the field. But very roughly, free will refers to the ability to behave independently of any like prior causes or whatever. But that has nothing to do with like ideas or concepts and stuff like that. Arcade says, "Whoa, the holy shit, that's crazy." He said they're just waiting to be brought into existence. So no, so mental representations, like I said, are symbols manipulated by our minds for the purposes of knowledge, and what we believe these are. Um, what we believe that these are actually like physical things in the brain that carry information. Um, and so we have to switch from different levels of explanation here. So we go from the functional mental level of explanation when we talk about mental representations to the implementational physical level, and we talk about things like um, neural networks and or parallel distributed processing or PDP. So this gets into the whole realm of connectionism, which is something talked about in cognitive neural networks, stuff like that. We basically believe how the whole how these computational representational systems work are through these neural networks on the physical level. Okay. Um, and that basically, if so, what the representational theory of thought roughly says is that um, our thoughts are basically sentences that are encoded in the brain, and that and that these sentences and token in the brain are defined over computational like processes, which is a fancy way of saying that the brain works like a computer. Con- Conquistador says, did you know, according to historical stone writings and archaeological evidence, the Hebrew god Yahweh was originally a thunder warrior god, which is why there's so much violence in the Old Testament? Yeah, that's not exactly new, my friend. Like most people know that that in that part of the world that Yahweh was the combination of two different Hebrew gods that became merged into one, which is became the biblical God. One was a warrior sky god, whereas the other one was sort of like the father of a family of different gods, and all of those were merged into just the one God Yahweh. This has nothing to do with my topic though, bro. So if you want to talk more about that, leave a super chat. But yeah, that's pretty well known within biblical history. I actually am tempted to do a master's in at the Hebrew, what's it called, the Hebrew University or whatever. It was actually co-founded by Albert Einstein and someone else back in the 1950s. They actually offer a master's in biblical archaeology, and I thought it'd be really cool since one of my favorite people when I was little was Indiana Jones, and of course the first movie was Raiders of the Lost Ark. So I am tempted because I think you can. I don't know if you actually have to go to the campus in Israel or if they let you do it online, but I am definitely. But I actually would go to Israel, but so I'm actually tempted to see if I can do that master's in biblical archaeology. But I'm not talking about that today. So if you want to talk more about that, you can drop a super chat and then we can talk about it. Otherwise, my topic is the mind and behavior. Flutterby says, I purposely try to be different to the norm. Life is too dull to be a sheep. Well, I mean, most people have their own idiosyncrasy, so it won't be hard to be different from the norm, depending on what the norm is. CDP says, I'm a compatibilist. And there's different forms of compatibilism as well, CDP. So you have one version of compatibilists who call themselves soft determinists, because hard determinists are by that very definition not compatibilists. They hard compatibilists thinks that there's no room for free will in a complete explanation of our behavior. because basically all our behavior will be um, um, I don't want to use the word determined because that's kind of redundant, but all of our behavior will be law like, um, fr- based on causes and events. But soft determinists believe that despite that, there'll still be a role for free will. And then there's other compatibilists who are libertarians, or what I metaphysical libertarians, again, not political libertarians, metaphysical libertarians who believe in free will, but then think that outside of free will, everything else is governed by scientific laws, just not behavior. So those are the two type of behaviors, and I mean compatibilists. And there's other versions too, but I just don't want to get into all the nuance because free will has been literally a topic in philosophy for like 2000 or plus years. So there's so many different positions you can take on this. Um, for my own position, I'm a determinist, but um, I'm a probabilistic determinist because I realize that ultimately, like ultimately, nature is probabilistic and not it's not going to be governed by hard nosed rules in the sense that we thought of back in the times of Newton and Leibniz, where everything can just be nailed down to exact things. Because we get into issues with quantum physics and all that sort of stuff. Something I do not want to go down that road, but I would just say whether we're talking about the messiness of human behavior or the messiness of of the ultimate nature of physics, it gets probabilistic, and it kind of defeats that whole sort of complete determinism that was the flavor of the 1600s or 1700s. Keep the door says, I just found out about this. No problem. I'm not a father, Harley, so I'm not answering any sort of psychological questions today. So if you have a question like that, I suggest you talk to someone you actually know, or find a professional, or you can go online to better to the there's an online therapy called BetterHelp. Search them out, but I don't give unsolicited psychological advice here. Come keep the doses. I understand. I hear you talking about free will, so I thought it was a religious talk. No, no, no. Someone else brought up free will, but he was asking whether it connected to the other things that we were talking about, which was um, talking about different sorts of um, cognitive phenomena. And I was telling him it was actually unrelated, but no, it was not a religious talk. What time is it for you? It is 9:18 here, p.m. Flatterby says, "What? So that does that mean that I'm a metaphysical whatchamacallit?" I don't know what a metaphysical whatchamacallit is. The only whatchamacallit I know is the candy bar, which is surprisingly good, by the way, because it came out in the 80s, or maybe even earlier, the 70s or 60s. But I didn't actually eat one until about, like, I don't know, like 8 years ago. Flatterby says, I just think I'm wonderfully weird. Nothing wrong with being weird as long as you can still stay tethered to reality. There's weird and then there's weird. You know what I mean? So But yeah, so as I surmise from this conversation, again, a lot of people just don't understand a lot of these basic concepts in cognitive science and philosophy of mind because these aren't really topics often taught. And even more of a shame is that a lot of philosophy departments are disappearing all over the country because a lot of universities rather throw most money at their STEM departments. So I've already said if if I come into a lot of money, I'm definitely gonna donate some money to my old philosophy department and linguistics department because they're pretty small departments, as well as my psychology department. So I want to support those non-STEM fields. Technically, well, technically, biopsychology could be a STEM, but it's embedded within the larger psychology department. So even if you did a concentration on the biological side of psychology, which I did, uh, the department itself is considered a behavioral science and wouldn't be considered a STEM per se. So I do hope that as a that I can become a wealthy alumni at some point that I can donate to my alma mater. I've donated to them in the past, but not at that amount, like millions or anything like that. I've donated like what, 25, $50, $100, something like that. So, but you guys have any other questions related to mental phenomena? And again, I'm not here to answer any to give any psychological advice. So for folks who came in like I am Harley, thinking that this would be a format for answering like psychological issues, like as far as mental health, I don't really address that. I am a fan um, of the channel Miss Needles. She also has her own channel, by the way. You can check her out. She's a German musician who's been struggling with her own health issues. Um, we actually had an interesting chat on that when she was saying that a lot of people come to social media and come to YouTube asking for psychological advice because it's easier for them. And I told her I can't speak for Europe or Germany, but here in America, it's pretty easy to find mental health help if you want it because it is one of those things that's covered through state health care or so-called Obamacare. Um, and like I said, you can get it even online through places like BetterHelp. And there's other ones besides BetterHelp, but I think BetterHelp is probably like the best known right now in online therapy. But there are others, or you can just go directly to your physician and receive a referral. And I told her here that there's so many mental health clinicians here in America that you can actually be picky in what type of clinician you want. Like you can actually pick people here as therapists based on things like their gender or race. Like a woman can say, "I want a female therapist." A black person can say, "Well, I want a black therapist," or I want a black female therapist. Or someone can say, "I want a therapist who specializes in cognitive behavioral therapy," or "I want a specialist who specializes in Gestalt therapy," or "I want a therapist that specializes in in human centered therapy," stuff like that. Like eh, there's no dearth of mental health clinicians here in America for someone to need help. So to me, so to, for me coming to someone's live stream to interrupt it, asking for psychological help is not acceptable. You need to handle that on your own. I'm not here to give you free advice. And trust me, if I were to give psychological advice, you're going to pay for it. You're not going to get free psychological advice from me for free. If you're gonna pay this, if you're gonna pay a mental health clinician per session, you're gonna pay me as well. Flutterby says, question for you again. Sorry, does electric shock delete or destroy or enhance the cognitive science? It doesn't delete or destroy or enhance. So, um, so, e- so it's not this type of electroshock treatments that went on in the early 20th century, which could have been kind of cruel and not very useful. What is now is a milder form called ECT or electroconvulsive therapy. These are mild shocks done to people, not 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 like the stuff that you saw on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. If you ever saw that classic movie, okay, with Jack Nicholson, or you read the book. I both read the book and saw the movie, but it's not that sort of electroshock therapy from the past where they just hook someone up to the little mental cap and then they send hundreds of volts through their brain. It's not like that. It's a very precise treatment. And it's also used. It's also is used for things like severe depression, right? Because so people suffering from severe depression do not respond to therapy, and they do not respond to medication. So for some of them, they'll only be able to respond by they'll only be able to respond to these mild electroshocks done transcranially. And it's like I said, it's called ECT, electroconvulsive therapy. It it doesn't change cognitive science in any way. Like I said, it's used as a treatment in clinical psychology or in psychiatry. So that's how it's used. Like I said, it's used for severe depression. I think it's also used for people who have some sort of neuromuscular, like not neuromuscular, like problems with I can't remember the name of it, but like it dealing with the sensory motor neurons and stuff like that. I can't remember the actual diseases. If someone knows, they can leave the name of those. But like stuff like that, things like I said, they won't respond to like psychotherapy or to medication. They might have to look into like using ECT. So and Flutterby gifted another number one of my memberships to Icy Kitty. How are all of you doing? The people that he sent my way, I appreciate you guys for checking in. Hope you enjoy the content that I provide. Please feel free to go through all my previous videos and check them out. Some you may agree with stuff that I obviously not going to agree with everything that I put on here, and that's completely okay. I think we can uh, we can disagree about things without being disagreeable. Like reasonable people can disagree with each other and still come to have an affinity for one another. So I hope that you do get the stuff that you do like you do get some entertainment out of it or maybe even learn something. But yeah, does that make sense for to be? So like I said, ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, is used for like treating severe mental um, disorders or things dealing with like neuropsychological problems. I'm actually starting to get hungry, guys. Luckily, I have some food here, so probably be making some in a little bit. I have to decide what I want to eat. Mercury Peanut Butter says, I heard it has some negative effects on schizos. Well, again, like I said, I can't speak for all of it, but like I said, the type of electroshocks they do now is a milder form than what they used to perform on people back in the day. And oftentimes that was performed without their permission. With ECT, they're actually getting the patient's permission to perform this this um this treatment on them. Like I said, and it's called electroconvulsive therapy. It's a much milder type of shock. They're not, like I said, they're not sending thousands of volts into someone's brain like that's not very useful and it's very dangerous. What is used now is like it's directed to like a specific area in the brain, so we know the parts in the brain that are affected through depression because usually there's a chemical imbalance of things like serotonin and dopamine and acetylcholine and stuff like that. So, but as far as its use on schizophrenics, I'm not sure. Plus, it depends on what type of schizophrenia because you have many different types. So you have catatonic schizophrenics, people who stay stuck in odd poses because everything around them is moving around so fast that they don't want to move and feel like they're gonna feel completely disjointed from reality. Then you have disorganized schizophrenics, people who have these very weird and bizarre thoughts. If you ever spoken to someone, you know what I mean. Like these may be very nice people. I They used to be when I lived here as a child. And my grandma, I'm at my grandmother's house. So when I lived here as a young teenager, like around 13, 14, 15, there was a guy who lived right next door to us who was a schizophrenic. He was a really cool guy. But he was schizophrenic, and you could tell because his thoughts used to just literally jump from one thing to the next. That's He was a disorganized schizophrenic. Um, and I remember it scared me because he said he got that way after college. So a lot, so we were believing, oh, college, like people will have meltdowns in college to turn them crazy. When that's really not the case. But anyway, that's another form of schizophrenia. Then you have a third form, which is paranoid schizophrenics. These people actually tend to be very bright. People like Dr. Nash, the brilliant mathematician, who they did the movie about A Brilliant Mind, starring Russell Crowe. He has paranoid schizophrenia. They're very bright, but again, bizarre thoughts. They believe someone's out to get them. They often hear thoughts in their head telling them to do things. And then there's a fourth type of schizophrenia, which is a which is basically like a miscellaneous form of schizophrenia where it doesn't have specific symptoms, but may have symptoms from either of the other previous three types. So it's a non-specified type of schizophrenia, but I don't know for which type of therapy someone might receive ECT for, because like I said, the best known example I know of people often receiving ECT is for like severe depression or for like neuropsychological problems. Flutterby says, so it can help with my complex regional pain syndrome. Interesting. Being neurological, mental pathway stuff. I thought only physical, like physio, was the only path. No, so when I talk about neuropsychological problems, um, we're so there are different types of neuropsychological disorders out there. I can't get into all of those. Some people believe that all psychiatric disorders are basically neuropsychological disorders. That's a that's a different topic. um, but yeah, typically it does deal. Typically, you're dealing with stuff that is like problems that are so severe that they often don't respond to psychiatric medication or psychoactive medication. That is, nor do they respond to psychotherapy. Um, that's when you might. That's when a a clinician might recommend ECT or electroconvulsive therapy. I'm not sure how it worked with pain as like something like neuropathy or something like that. I'm not sure if it's used for that. I know that one thing they used to recommend for neuropathy was actually smoking weed. Believe it or not, like before medical marijuana was legal here in the U.S., there was people who was getting prescribed through government um, to allow them to treat um, neuropathy because literally nothing else would help assuage the pain. But I really can't speak for complex regional pain syndrome. I'm to be honest, I'm not sure what that is, and if it is something related to neuropathy, I'm not sure if ECT would be the right way to go. I cannot give anyone a prognosis on on their problems. I'll always say speak to your primary care doctor about it, and they can refer you to a specialist for something like that. CDP asked Flutterby, is it in his legs by any chance? Mercanor Peanut Butter says there is an account on Instagram of a mother with an autistic child, and when he doesn't get Applebee's, he put her in headlocks and punches her, and she treats it like it's just a daily struggle. She's in well, unfortunately, she's enabling him. One thing you don't want to do with someone, whether they're on the autistic spectrum or suffering thought disorders or any other sort of mental problem, is you you don't let them get away with bad behavior, because what if they do this to someone else, or what if they take it too far with you? You don't by not correcting them in some form, you're enabling the behavior. This is where it gets down to behavioral therapy. Like when it comes to down to behavioral therapy, it doesn't matter like what um, it may not matter what the root causes of the problem is. We can still condition that person to act appropriately in given circumstances. This is why behavioral therapy is so useful. Flutterby says it's in his left leg. Yeah, so I'm sorry if you're going through a lot of pain, man. But yeah, I'm not going to recommend you something that I can't say that it would be used for. I would say go to your primary care doctor to have that checked. If you, which I'm sure you've already have, but they will be the ones to recommend you to a specialist to show you the best way of treating it. Because I can't armchair diagnose someone nor give them an armchair prognosis. Um, CDP says I have a friend who suffered from CRPS in his feet for years. He ended up getting mild electroshock therapy and it fixed neural pathways. Okay, so CDP is actually saying that it is actually used for that. And what he's talking about as being mild electroshock therapy, that's exactly what I'm calling. That's exactly what ECT is. Electroconvulsive therapy is a milder form of shock therapy. Like most of them don't call it shock therapy anymore because of its because of its people will associate it with the cruel shock therapy treatments of the 20th century, when they used to do it to people involuntarily, and it used to be much more stronger shocks that they gave them. But ECT is not like that. Most people won't even like feel it because it's delivered in a much mild manner. Flutterby's thanking CDP. He says, "Thank you so much. Got the diagnosis a month ago and was told I'd have it for life. You're giving me hope." Yeah, like I said, I would take it up with your doctor. Ask them, is electroconvulsive therapy something that would be right for you for your condition? CDP says the diagnosis was a long path, I bet, but don't give up. It's manageable and reversible. Best of luck to you. Good information, CDP. Thank you. He's oh yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot it now. Not it's not called that now. It's ECT. Yeah, yeah. I was just correcting you because, like I said, people, clinicians today don't want ECT to be confused with the cruel treatments of the past. Like I said, if you ever seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like the forced electroshock therapy, which they sometimes use as punishment on mental patients. Sometimes they even did partial lobotomies of these people. Like it was really cruel, which led to the closing of all these psychiatric hospitals, which was a mistake. They should have, instead of closing down all these psychiatric hospitals, what they should have done is institute a change in how they treated people, because we still need these psychiatric hospitals. This is why homelessness has doubled or tripled since the closing of these psychiatric hospitals back in the 70s, because at least half or more of the homeless on the streets are people with untreated mental disorders. He said, "Don't worry, I'm not about to stick my toe in a plug socket." Well, I certainly hope not. I've gotten a mild shock once with at in a plug socket, but it wasn't my finger going in. I was actually plugging in like a hair trimmer, and my hands had sweat on them, so it conduct. So when I stuck it in the socket, I think it conduct. I conducted something like a discharge from the socket, from the trimmer to my hand. That was not a comfortable experience. But yeah, since CDP brought it up, you might want to go back to your doctor Flerby and ask him if ECT might work with your condition with CRPS. Because like I said, that's actually the first time I've heard of it. Um, but off of that, do we have any other questions about mind and behavior, brain and behavior? Like I said, it's different levels of explanation. Mercanoy says, I think the whole autism spectrum will become obsolete because I supposedly have it as well as ADHD, which I definitely have ADHD, but I think the spectrum is far too broad. Actually, that is a very that's a very good criticism, Mercanoy. A lot of people do think that the autistic spectrum is way too broad, that you're actually classifying a bunch of different illnesses under one umbrella when they're really not the same. I actually tend to agree with that. I think I'm I agree with a lot of mental health specialists as well, that they're doing a disservice to people by trying to put all these different illnesses under one umbrella term. And I think the only reason they do so is because they want it to be they want all the different mental health illnesses to be like nicely delineated. Like you have the spectrum of you have a spectrum for psychopathology, right? I mean, not I'm sorry, not psychopathology. You have a um, you have a spectrum for psychotic disorders, right? Then you have a spectrum for depressive disorders. Then you have a spectrum for autistic disorders. Like, I'm sorry, it may be the case that not all these illnesses can cleanly be put into a spectrum. Maybe they have some overlapping symptoms, but that doesn't mean that they should all be under the same umbrella term. And in doing so, it may do a disservice to people who suffer these problems because these these categories are too broad. So I agree. Um, and then with ADHD, again, you're going to have overlapping symptoms with ADHD. So, for instance, with me, I have clinical depression. Some aspects of clinical depression overlap with ADHD. So, when initially I did go see a clinician, I thought I had adult ADD, which is the adult version of ADHD, adult ADD, because the reason it's called adult ADD is because usually they don't suffer all the hyperactivity that younger adolescents and children have, but they still have all the intentional problems and distractions to keep them from, you know, being organized or being able to buckle down and do cognitive higher level cognitive tasks. And it came to my doctor's attention that I may not have adult ADD because I brought to 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 the session with me like a philosophy book. He was like, "What's that?" And I was like, "It's a book by this really important philosopher who also recently died, unfortunately, um, named Saul Kripke." And the book was called "On Naming and Necessity." And he was like, "What's that about?" I was like, "Well, it's an analytic philosophy book that talks about um, things dealing with um, modal logic and dealing with the problems of an analytic philosophy of like um, names and naming things and objects and how they refer to phenomena and all sort of stuff." And his eyes got big. He was like, "What?" He was like, "That doesn't sound like something someone would read who's suffering from ADHD." I was like, "Oh." he, he was like, he is like, a lot of my ADHD patients can barely buckle down to read anything, much less something like that. He was like, "Well, you know what?" He said, "Well, let's try the Ritalin and a Concerta. If it works, then you have ADD, but if not, you don't." And spoiler alert, they the Ritalin and Concerta didn't really work. I mean, they worked so far as it could allow me to focus, but I didn't need it to focus when it came to my academic work. It's just that I had a lot of, but I did suffer a lot of inattentiveness. The problem was that inattentiveness was actually due to depression, because clinical depression also causes inattention as well, which overlaps with ADHD. But obviously, those are two separate psychiatric disorders, right? So sometimes we can do a disservice to people by the DSM-5, the Bible of which is the Bible of psychiatry and mental health, trying to delineate everything into these nice little categories when in reality some of these illnesses may not fit these things just because we want them to, because it makes everything nice and orderly. Robert kind of says, "Yeah, I too have ADHD. I take vitamin B. It helps kind of balance it out a little bit." Well, if you genuinely have ADHD, Robert, or been diagnosed with it, you should actually go see someone, because the vitamin B might be you working because there's other issues. So might want to go see if you need to take something else, something like Ritalin or Strattera or Adderall. Something like Adderall is like a basically like a illegal form of speed, right? Whereas Ritalin is sort of like a synthetic form of speed. And then you have Strattera, which is also sort of like a type of amphetamine, but Adderall itself is definitely an amphetamine, whereas Strattera and which is the I think I'm not sure if that's the generic name or not, but Strattera or Ritalin, like those are like synthetic amphetamines. They're not actual amphetamines, but if you respond to speed, but more than likely those will work better than just using vitamin B alone. The vitamin, if vitamin B is helping for you, that might also be a sign of you having some sort of nutritional deficiency. Um, CDP says it's an umbrella term, like how a lot of physical illnesses are blanketly termed fibromyalgia. Okay, so again, that's something new. I didn't know that there was actually a bunch of different forms of fibromyalgia. I thought that was one specific thing. I didn't know that was an umbrella term for a bunch of different illnesses. Again, clinicians like things nice and orderly, but we know in the real world that things don't often work that way. And even some of these clinicians who actually are very well enmeshed into their clinical studies and stuff like that will note that themselves that a lot of these things don't fit under these umbrella terms as cleanly as we would like them, as much as they would like them to be. Flubby says like one out of 10 people are normal now. That's too ridiculous. Well, I don't think so. So normal, depending on what you mean. So normal takes on normal is one of those ambiguous terms, right? Normal in scientific terms just means the mean average, which usually means like so a lot of different so all human traits. So this is something we know from behavioral genetics. All human traits are partly hereditary, and many of our traits, whether they're psychological or physical, are normally distributed through the general population, which means we can plot a Gaussian curve or a so-called bell curve for these different traits. And what falls in the middle, the mean average, is what's called normal. That's what that's what we mean by normal when people in this when people in behavioral research talk about it. We're talking about the people who fall within the mean average. But how people use it in everyday talk, when they say normal, they mean people who conform to the majority. That's those are two different things. Like conforming to the majority and someone who just falls within the mean average of people within the general population on any on some given trait or the personality traits or whatever. That's that's what we term normal. It's not a talk about conformity to the majority. Some things you do want people to conform to the majority, though, when it comes to like being law abiding citizens or things like that, right? There, you do want people to sort of conform to the majority in some aspects. But like I said, how we talk about normal and how people talk about normal in everyday talk isn't necessarily the same thing. Uh, CDP says my friend was diagnosed with ADD. Turns out he was bipolar. Again, exactly. Bipolar is on the depressive disorder spectrum. So again, people with bipolar disorders, and there's three types of bipolar disorder. Um, but to be diagnosed with either of the three, there has to be um, some sort of symptoms of manic episodes to get it because a person with bipolar disorder can have manic episodes without even having the depression, and they're going to be classified as bipolar. But there's going to be a huge overlap with adult ADD, of course. The inattention, the hyperactivity, which the hyperactivity will be the mania, the mania or the manic episodes. Robert kind of says they throw that word depression around a lot too. But that being said, do you believe your depression comes from an underlying issue, or do you think that's just how your brain is? Just asking. Uh, well, again, most mental disorders have a partly biological basis, but not every person who are predisposition to have certain mental health problems will manifest it. It usually takes something to trigger it. Some sort of psychological distress or trauma will often be the catalyst for these mental health problems, which someone already has to be genetically predisposed to having. So I think that's the best way I can answer it. Other than that, I can't say. But clinical depression can run in like can run in families. Like I said, you any sort of disorder, you're probably gonna be some sort of genetic predisposition to. Like I said, the famous Dr. Nash, who was the subject of the movie and the book A Brilliant Mind, who was a brilliant mathematician, his son also suffered paranoid schizophrenia as well. But the thing is, with paranoid schizophrenia, it starts to it starts to reduce as you get older. So as Dr. Nash became older, his episodes of schizophrenia started to die down. So he was able to see these problems in his son as he was suffering from them, who also became an accomplished mathematician as well. So there has to be a genetic predisposition to such disorders, but then it's also going to be caused. But then it's usually going to be caused by some sort of triggered by some sort of psychological distress. Flurby says maybe it's more of an evolution of the brain and the measuring needs to be changed. I don't think so. Then also you have to remember our brains have changed very little in the 200,000 years since modern humans have come about. Some of the things we consider mental health, some of the things that we consider health problems now may have actually been useful for our ancestors. Like obviously being paranoid keeps you from becoming victims of other humans coming to attack you, or roving wild animals that seek to devour humans. So there could have been an advantage to humans who were a little bit more paranoid than the rest. um, Schizophrenia may have came from people who were able to see things, make connections where most people can't make connections, and that may have led to certain inventiveness. So, for instance, again, Dr. Nash said that his schizophrenia was a part and parcel of his ability to do math in the way that he did. He was a Nobel winning mathematician. He said that when he took medication for his schizophrenia, it also killed a lot of his ability to do the math that he did, which is why he will often abandon his medication and suffer these schizophrenic episodes so that he could still do his mathematical research. So there might have been an evolutionary advantage to people who we now term with thought disorders, to be able to make novel connections where other people can't make these connections, as as mathematical research is highly abstract. Okay, or let's look at people who are termed psychopaths or have anti-personality disorders. They all that falls they all fall within the same spectrum, like psych spectrum of people with psychotic disorders, from you know people who have anti-personality disorder, sociopaths, psychopaths, narcissistic personality disorders, or narcissists. The advantage to that would be someone who may have to carry out um, very difficult tasks that a more compassionate person wouldn't be able to carry out, like a person who had to be the person the I forgot the term for the people who have to behead people, or carry out capital punishment. Like, it would be beneficial that these people do lack empathy, which is the the most common trait of people who are psychopaths, is they lack empathy for others. That would be useful for someone who might have to do things like go to war and carry out certain hideous tasks, or someone again who has to like carry out like capital punishment, stuff like that. So, but for this, but in contemporary society, these these sorts of dispositions and thoughts or behaviors would be considered abnormal because they don't fit the needs of our society today. CDP says we need more diagnosticians in hospitals. So many people suffer necessarily due to poor diagnosis. That's true. It depends on the quality of your doctor. So, um, money talks. When it comes to American medical care, money talks. Like, money here can you can go and find the best of the best in any particular medical field. But when you just come into a ER, or don't have the money to see the top of the line people, it's a crapshoot. So, Dilford says, "Thank God for the gifted memberships." What's up, Dilford? Thank you again for the memberships, guys. Mercanoid says, "I almost don't want more people getting diagnosed with ADHD. In the past 5 years, ADHD meds have had more shortages and become more expensive faster than Ozempic." That I didn't know. What I do know, Mercanoid, is that in the past 25 years, it has been overdiagnosed. Like, simply, not every kid who has impulsive behavior is necessarily suffering from ADHD. It's just the fact that some kids can't stay tethered to a chair for 8 hours and expect them to be productive. They need, especially today, when a lot of these school systems have cut out physical education. You know, we I had to charge my phone. Sorry, guys. Um, we used to have gym every day. So hey, you might have English first period, math second period, music second period, then fourth period. You're in a gym, dod- dodging balls with your life. No diddy, but but you might be, by fourth period, you're in there dodging balls that people are throwing at your head at the speed of a bullet, trying to give you a concussion, and then right after that you go into lunch, and then you go to recess. So you had got you had that break. You had where you could have like you could get out that physical exertion. Whereas now a lot of these kids they don't even have gym or recess, and they're expected to just sit in class all day long. Particularly guys, like boys weren't meant to sit all day long because a lot of these people who are overly diagnosed with ADHD tend to be boys, right? So, like I said, I was misdiagnosed with adult ADD when it was really that I had clinical depression. So, um, but now with it being overdiagnosed, I'm guessing there is a more demand for the medication, which is going to drive the prices up. And for some people, like I said, for some children who have maybe who either have ADHD, a milder form of it, or they may just have problems with impulsivity, they would probably just benefit from being involved in sports. That could help. This is why we used to have the little league baseball or pee wee, pee wee league baseball, or we would have, um, we would have, like re- recreational, rec basketball or flag football, stuff like that. We would have, team like sports teams for little kids, so they could do that, or soccer. So for some of these kids who are being overdiagnosed with ADHD, it may be just the case they need to get out and have some physical activity because a lot of them have these helicopter parents that won't even let them go beyond the house because everyone's paranoid that someone's going to hurt their kid, when the truth of the matter is most people don't even want to deal with your kids. Like, they should get the freedom and opportunity to roam around like Gen X did, and Boomers did, and Silent Generation did, and Greatest Generation did, and everyone else. But somehow, when it came to millennials and Generation Z kids, all of a sudden, life is too dangerous in the suburbs that they can't roam around and explore and have fun like the way we did. These kids are cooped up in the house all day. They're on social media with using platforms that make them retarded, like TikTok. And there's a whole thing in behavioral research about the TikTok phenomenon that's actually destroying people's attentional spans. And meanwhile, like I said, they're not getting fresh air. They're not getting any physical activity. So it can be a confluence of factors. But guys, I don't want to talk too much again about all this clinical stuff. That's not the aim of this topic. The aim of this topic was the mind and behavior, not specifically. Too many times people, as soon as you talk about psychology, they just want to talk about clinical psychology, and I really don't have that much interest in clinical psychology. And if you take a psychology class, you'll learn that most of psychology is deals with normal behavior, not with abnormal behavior. For some people, the most interesting stuff is abnormal behavior, but by and large, the majority of psychology studies normal behavior, not abnormal behavior. So I don't want to stay stuck on this for too long. But I'll answer the first few comments, then we're going to switch gears back to the original topic. Merkino says stuff like ADHD and autism being misdiagnosed in impoverished communities is a huge issue. A lot of these kids just have bad home life. A lot of the kids in special ed schools are just high risk youth. Some, but some not really. A lot of these special ed kids have actually taken neuropsychological evaluations, and it's shown either that they have um, below average IQs and often other cognitive deficits. which is why they're in special ed, or they may have specific learning disabilities like dyslexia or dyscalculia, things like that. Lazy Guy says, thank you for your service. Appreciate it. Thank you. Um, Jennifer says, if you could restructure the school system, what classes would you make mandatory? My guess is that you would make philosophy, psychology, physical education, and politics mandatory. No, so if so, for one, I would make sure that I would take it back where art and music were still required. They Public education was did a huge disservice to kids by only focusing on the STEM fields. You need art, music, and history to make well-rounded students. This is why some of these kids can't think, and that's why they're socially awkward. They don't know how to. They don't develop the soft skills. I would institute art, music, and history. Those would be mandatory. Logic would be mandatory for secondary school students, which is like middle school and high school. Logic would be required, both formal logic and informal logic. Informal logic could fall under the language arts, and formal logic could fall under your math requirements. So yeah, I would make logic mandatory. Um, Both informal and informal. Music, art, and history would be required. Physical education will be required all the way up to the 12th grade. Um, Because gym is important. People need to get that physical exertion out, whether they want to or not. Because I know everyone wants to be in high school wants to be cool and not sweat or whatever, but it actually helps. Because at the end of the day, high school kids are still kids. So they still need they still need to get that physical activity. Um, and probably either a class on like rhetoric or public speaking. I would make mandatory, and again, that could fall into language arts, public speaking. The, this would Between logic and public speaking, this would get it out of the heads of these young kids that they could think that they think they're entitled to people accepting their beliefs, and if people don't accept their beliefs, that that's somehow tantamount to violence. Because you have these dumbass fucking college kids now who come onto campuses looking for safe spaces and shit, and think that if you disagree with them being of one of these 58 genders, that somehow you're inciting violence against them. That's fucking dumb. They should be required to learn this public speaking skills. They should be required to learn logic, informal and formal. Especially now that we see people performing more poorly on IQ tests today than they were 30 years ago. That's bad because for the last 100 years, we've seen people performing better than previous generations on IQ tests. This has been the first generation where we're starting to see people perform worse than previous generations on the IQ test. So, and that's not because people are becoming dumber. It's because they're less um, they they do less well at abstract reasoning, and it shows and we can see that in its effects on society today. The effects of people who are less well suited to doing abstract reasoning. So those would be the things I would change. I would make sure that art and music remain mandatory in public schools the way they were back in the 80s and 90s, as well as history. I would make gym mandatory for everyone because not everyone's meant to sit down all 8 hours of a day. That's why these kids are fat and lazy and effeminate. And I would make sure they have to do logic and public speaking, so they learn how to think. So they learn how to think and reason and interact with others without without feeling like someone's personally attacking them just because they disagree with them. That's fucking dumb. So those would be my suggestions for public school. Peppermint Aries says hello. Oh, what's up, Pepper? Mercanoy says the lack of music education in public schools beyond elementary is criminal. There's band, but most kids these days have zero interest in band. They want beat making or guitar classes. Yeah, like because of music education in elementary school, I learned to love classical music. I don't. Let's be honest. How many black kids you know growing up in the hood would have learned to love classical music? Not many. But yeah, from because I grew up in the mid. As a kid, I lived in the Midwest in Illinois, in nice little suburbs outside of Chicago. We had, music education where we learned we had to do we had to do stuff like musical bingo where we matched the composer with the music and stuff like that. And I learned about people like Mozart and Bach and Chopin and Dvorak, you know, Beethoven and so forth and so on. Um, and then in middle school, they required us to do chorus, to actually sing in chorus and learn musical notation. Unfortunately, because I spent most of my time in the Midwest where we didn't have that sort of musical education, I didn't know how to write music when I came to school back in Maryland and had to take chorus. And I'm pretty sure I couldn't sing well either because I've never had to sing in my other previous classes. I don't believe we just focus on music education, but not on actually performing music, except for like 1 or 2 days of using a recorder, which they made every parent buy their kid, and they might have been like just 1 or 2 classes with the recorder. I also remember asking my mother if I could take viola lessons, and they never got it from me, but I wish I did because my friend ended up taking lessons on the I can't remember if it was a viola as well or a cello, but I wanted to do that. I was like I was a all American suburban kid. I wanted to play pee wee baseball and recreational basketball, do Cub Scouts, take music lessons. Like Ninja Turtles came out. I wanted to pet turtles, like all American kid of the '80s. So, but yeah, a lot of stuff is missing from public education today, and it's showing in the results. Like most of the better students are coming from either private schools or charter schools or public schools where there's a magnet program for talented kids. Uh, Mercanoy says, I knew someone in high school who felt hopeless and was self medicating with marijuana, but making music is the only thing he felt he had left. I guarantee if he didn't have that, he wouldn't be alive. Pepper Myers says, kids supposed to have a lot of energy and run around. I'm telling you, my energy was off the chart as a child. Why would they take physical education out of schools? I would never understand. Either for budgetary reasons, Pepper, or because a lot of these schools back in 2000 wanted to only teach STEM courses because at the time, President Bush Jr., W. Bush, thought that our schools should reach to the should be able to improve standardized test scores, and he made it so that schools will receive funding if they had high standardized test scores, but they would pull funding from schools that had low standardized test scores. So a lot of these schools took their budgets and put most of their money into um, making sure these kids receive better test scores. But that was a mistake because instead of improving the courses, all they did was teach them how to better take the test. which doesn't really help and defeats the purpose of the whole standardized testing in the first place. The standardized testing isn't just so you do well on the test, it's to show how people are is supposed to be a reflection of of the quality of the education itself. Around that time, a lot of these lower income schools didn't have the budgets, like I said, that the schools in better communities had to divert to different sorts of uh, well-rounded educational curricula where they had music and art and history and gym and math and English and science and tech ed and home ec and stuff like that. They just said, well, we're going to just teach them English, math, science. That's it. And if they do have music or art or something, it'll be either optional, or if it's mandatory, it'll just be like once a week or something like that. That was a mistake. Delphi says my gym offers free summer memberships to high schoolers, and it is always packed with those creatures. I think they enjoy it because they don't think of it as school, but as a way to socialize with friends. That's good. That's not bad. Pepper says, "Oh, that's a great idea, Delphi." Yeah. He said, "Yeah, I hate it because every treadmill and equipment is always being used, but at the same time, I'm happy to know that these goblins are taking care of their physical health." That's funny. Like when I go to the Planet Fitness near my in my neighborhood. Well, not in my neighborhood, but actually not too far from my neighborhood. Um, the little city, these little city kids are allowed during the summer to come there for free. And I'm like, man, they don't hog up all the equipment, but they see it as like doing a good deed, allowing these kids to come to the gym instead of them being on the streets or whatever. But to be fair, those city kids rarely cause a problem. I just don't like a lot of congestion. When you work, when you going between weight stations and stuff like that. But they don't. Yeah, they rarely cause a problem. But I don't know. I guess it's better than being on the streets, but it's not like that's a bad neighborhood anyway. So whatever. Um, Mercanoy says, in the school I went to, the free summer membership for the gym, it wouldn't go well. Cops would be called there every other hour. Oh yeah, so completely different than my, like I say, my Planet, the local Planet Fitness I go to about 20 minutes away from here. Like I said, I don't know if they still do it, but I know when I first started going there, they had this program where they let this city, the local kids from the city come there for free, and they rarely caused a problem. Mercano says, I remember a particularly heated basketball game where a kid punched the door and cut his hand open and needed stitches. Oh, he just sounds stupid. All right, guys. So let me get back to the original topic, because otherwise, I'm about to go at when I hit the 3 hour mark. It's 2 hours and 53 minutes in right now. Around the 3 hour mark, I think I'm gonna leave so I can go eat and talk with Mrs. Contrarian and answer all my messages that I got like 2 hours ago. But yeah, like I said, the original topic was everything you know about the mind and behavior is wrong. Because again, like I said, most people have very little contact with scientific psychology or cognitive science or neuroscience or any other sort of behavioral and social research, unless they actually went to college or beyond, because it's not depending on your depending on your school. They might not offer it. Like at my school, at my high school, they did offer psychology. At least the third school I went to, I actually ended up going to three different high schools: one in Philly, one in Philadelphia, one in Baltimore, the suburbs of Baltimore, and then one in the DC suburbs. The one in the DC suburbs was the most well funded because it was in the at the time the most um, the most affluent county in the country, Montgomery County. It's still in the top five, if not the top three, but it's been but Howard County in Maryland, I think, has become more affluential. And right now, I think the richest county in the country now is actually in North Virginia. I think Fairfax County. Then you also have um, I forgot what county that is in upstate New York, Westchester County. So between like Montgomery County, Maryland, Howard County, Maryland, Fairfax County, Virginia, and Westchester County, New York. Those are probably the wealthiest counties in the country. And being so, like I said, when I went to school there, they offered all sorts of things. They offered a philosophy course in high school. My father didn't want me to take it because he told the guidance counselor he thought that would be dangerous. So guess what? I took it as a fucking major in college. Psychology I didn't take in high school either. Both of which I was interested in as a senior. I I needed classes to fill a full day anyway. Otherwise, I would have been one of those students that did like a half day. The seniors do. I don't know if they still do that, but what seniors used to have like a half day sort of thing because they just didn't have enough classes they needed to take. But I took a full round of you know 7 classes. But and I took dumb stuff like baking and creative writing or or uh, career planning. I could have took like philosophy and psychology, but well, again, took them as majors in college, so made up for that, right? Delphi says, "Are there any psychology YouTubers you watch to see their POV on certain subjects of psychology?" Yeah, Steven Pinker. Um, who else? um, Sometimes I watch Jordan Peterson, but he really doesn't stick with psychological subjects too often, which I wish he did because he sounds more competent when he talks about psychological subjects than when he talks about other things. Um, but sometimes watch Jordan Peterson, Steven Pinker. Trying to think who else. Um, I think there's a neuroscientist that I watch, and neuroscience is actually a part of psychology. Although sometimes people see it as unfortunately sometimes it's shown as being a separate science, but it's actually neuroscience is actually a field within psychology. It just intersects with neurobiology, just like cognitive science is an interdisciplinary um, field, but it's not. But unlike neuroscience, it's not strictly under psychology. Neuroscience is. But I think there's a neuroscientist that I watched. I can't think of his name, but Steven Pinker, Steven Pinker, Jordan Peterson. Um, I think that's about it. Mercantil says, I personally think Westchester is a shithole for being so wealthy. Well, yeah, just because it's wealthy doesn't mean all aspects of it are going to be great. Even Montgomery County, like certain parts of it, like Tacoma Park and Silver Spring, aren't that great as compared to places like um, Bethesda and Chevy Chase, or what's the place where they have a reality show, the real wives of I can't remember the name of that part of Montgomery County, but yeah, there's super wealthy parts of Montgomery County. Then there's areas which are still higher income compared to surrounding parts of Maryland, like Baltimore, but wouldn't be considered very high income to as compared to the other parts of Montgomery County. Because the whole DC suburbs area is filled with a lot of people who work in government and politics. That's why some of these people are so have such high incomes, which means like in a place like Montgomery County, 100 you're not 120. If you have a average income of 120,000 a year, that's considered that's considered like very modest in Montgomery County. Whereas if you have that in like Baltimore, you're doing pretty well. And if you have it in somewhere like Western Maryland, you're doing really well. So, um, but yeah, uh, Jennifer says, are there any new studies or research that has come out recently that has debunked any previous claims regarding psychology? So I'm not aware of anything as of recently, but I know about 10 years ago there was a big shock. They found out that a lot of classical research couldn't be wasn't weren't replicable. Like a lot of the results of a lot of research that make up the bulk of stuff taught in psychological textbooks, that a lot of that stuff actually wasn't replicable. Um, and and part of that was because a lot of these experimental psychologists weren't doing behavioral statistics very well, and it became a huge crisis within scientific psychology and behavioral science in general, that a lot of behavioral studies can't be replicated. And that's a huge thing because we tend to think that the 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 conclusions of research are based these these results being able to be replicated by other studies that repeat the methodology and processes of previous research, as well as that when you as well as that when you have studies that differ from each other's in different ways but have the same conclusions, that's called converging evidence, which is hard evidence that those conclusions are accurate. But then when you start having people do replicate studies, there have been textbook examples of research on important psychological phenomena for the last 50 or so years, and a lot of that stuff can't be replicated. It becomes a big deal. So yeah, that was a huge thing in psychological research as of like 10 years ago. And like I said, one of the things from that to come out of it was that psychologists need to be better doing behavioral statistics, and that they need to stop relying on the whole p is less than zero point zero 0.05, which doesn't always give you, which may not be a strong enough, may not be strong enough for uh, for research, for the rigor of behavioral research. P less than 0.05 is the probability that something is false, is like less than is the probability that something is true is greater than 95% or whatever. However you want to interpret that probabilist excuse me probability estimate. But like p is p less than zero point zero 0.05 has been like the golden the golden rule for a lot of behavioral research, and that's been a problem because a lot of mathematical statisticians have saying no, you guys are doing these behavioral stats wrongly, and that's why you're saying that's why a lot of your research is coming out is not replicable because you you there's a lot of error in how you did your research methodology. So that means that some of those former conclusions may be debunked. We'll see. I haven't checked in since like 9 years ago on that, so I'm not sure if they're throwing out all this stuff altogether, or they're just going to have to put more nuance into some of these classical experiments like the Milgram's prison experiment, or the Wug test, or the children's marshmallow test, and all these other sorts of things. Like, we'll see. Kelly says, "Can I join your live? Yes or no?" No, because I don't know you, and I'm not going to let someone come onto my live and do something stupid. Nope. Anyone who comes on my live has to be personally vetted. Jeff says, "Have you heard of Neuralink founded by Elon Musk? What are your thoughts on it?" My thoughts is I'm not putting any invasive piece of machinery in my body. The funny thing is when the irony to it was that people kept saying that Bill Gates was going to do this, or other people, or other big name technocrats were aiming to do this sort of thing, and they was like, no, we're not. We're not developing any technology like that to create um, tech to put in your body, invasive body tech. And Elon was like, well, actually, I want to create invasive body tech where we can actually, improve and, improve our cognitive ability, or work or help people who have mental disabilities and stuff like that. I wouldn't do it. And I think anyone who's rational would not be one of the first, be in that first wave or even second wave of people who do it. I'm not doing it. Do you think it might potentially help those with certain behavioral issues, or do you think it is us getting too close to becoming Skynet? No, not Skynet. It actually becomes close to transhumanism. Transhumanism is where like you have a merging of humans and machines. That's what it's that's what it would be driving towards. And again, I don't trust it. He he's a he's a creative guy, very inventive, but I don't know how well thought out his ideas are. Again, he is on the autistic spectrum, and some of his ideas are better than others. I find Neuralink to be quite specious at this point. So I couldn't recommend it. And he has no background, like he's someone who has no background in cognitive science, neuroscience, in medicine, uh, neurobiology, or any other related field to be developing this thing. Which I'm sure he's going to have experts who are in those fields do that research, of course. But I don't trust just a random person just because they're a billionaire with fanciful ideas. But yeah, I'm about to go. It's actually past 3 hours now, and I say I was gonna get off once it hits the 3 hour mark. But if you have any, if you have any last minute questions, I'll take those before I go though. But yeah, no, I don't trust Neuralink, and I don't trust Elon Musk to be a mature person to deal with something that potentially paradigm paradigm shifting, such as wearable tech. I mean, invasive body tech. Wearable tech is fine. Like wearable tech, like something you wear on your body, like a necklace or medical bracelet and stuff like that. That has um, that has like um, artificial intelligence in it. That's fine. I'll use wearable tech, but I'm not putting tech in my body. No, not doing it. Definitely a shame I came late, but you have a good night, man. Thanks, I appreciate it. Um, but yeah, I'm like I said, if you got any more questions, just leave in the comment section. Though I'll still get to it, but I'm just gonna shut this down because it's like 3 hours and 11 minutes, and I think a lot of the people who I was talking with earlier have already fizzled out because I can't even see the number on my screen of how many people are in the chat. So I'm guessing no more than like one or two, including yourself. But I appreciate you for signing up for my membership and everyone else who did as well. Um, but again, like, I, feel free to ask me if you have any other questions that come to you after this ended. Just leave them on here, and I'll still get to them. But I don't want to drag it on if there's not a lot of people participating. But I always appreciate it, Delphit. But I'll see you guys later, and hopefully I can get. I'm gonna try to get Miss Needle back on again too when she's feeling well. She was supposed to go to the hospital a few days back. Unfortunately, she said she went tried 3 different hospitals and they rejected her, and now she has to find another one. Thanks, CDP. I appreciate it, man. But she said she's willing to come back on the channel. She and I actually talked for like almost 2 or 3 hours, like 2 days ago. And I was like, man, we should have put all of this on live. She was laughing. She was like, yeah, we should. So I was like, all right, let's. I was like, well, next time, I said, instead of me calling you, I said, let's just go live. And she was like, okay, cool. She's like, she's like, we'll just do it when I, have some good battery life on my phone and I'm feeling well. I was like, that's cool. She's really sweet, and I'm probably gonna make her a moderator too to help me out because Mrs. Contrarian obviously can't always do it. So more people I have, the better I can regulate this to keep the number of trolls to a minimum. Um, but all right, fellas, I got guys. I'll catch you later. All right, appreciate it.